When the three nations stood together in 2018 and announced their joint bid to host the 2026 World Cup, the architecture of the arrangement felt settled and obvious. The United States would be the engine, the commercial giant, the country with the infrastructure, the broadcasting relationships, the stadium scale, and the institutional weight to carry the world's biggest sporting event. Canada and Mexico would contribute their venues, their matches, their local color. The story of the 2026 World Cup, everyone assumed, would be written in Los Angeles and Dallas and New York. Canada and Mexico would be the opening chapters. America would be the book. 8 years later, 3 days before the tournament opens, that assumption deserves revisiting. Not because the United States has failed to deliver the infrastructure it promised. The stadiums are extraordinary. SoFi in Los Angeles is arguably the most spectacular football venue ever built. AT&T in Dallas, MetLife in New Jersey, Lumen Field in Seattle. These are genuinely world-class venues that any tournament would be proud to host. The commercial machine is functioning. The broadcasting deals are in place. The final on the 19th of July will be watched by more people simultaneously than almost any event in human history. But here is the interesting part. In the space between the institutional machinery of the tournament and the lived experience of attending it, in the warmth of welcome, in the depth of football culture, in the moments that will define this tournament's public identity, Canada and Mexico have been gaining ground, steadily, measurably, and in ways that the promotional architecture of the event did not fully anticipate. And as the opening ceremonies approach, the gap between what each host nation is delivering and what each was expected to deliver has become one of the most compelling subplots of the entire competition. Let's go through it carefully, because the story of how Canada and Mexico have gained ground is not a single episode. It is several things happening simultaneously, each reinforcing the others. Start with the opening ceremonies, because the decision to stage 3 separate opening ceremonies, one in each host nation for the first time in World Cup history, was supposed to give the United States the grandest stage, and the American ceremony on the 12th of June at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles is genuinely spectacular on paper. Katy Perry headlines. She is joined by Lisa of Blackpink, the first female K-pop artist and the first Thai performer ever to headline a World Cup opening ceremony. Future, Anita, Rema, Tyla, and DJ Sanjoy complete the lineup. A 13-minute ceremony, 90 minutes before the United States play Paraguay. The scale is real. The production investment is serious. The global audience it will reach is extraordinary. But look at what Mexico assembled the evening before. At the Azteca on the 11th of June, the stadium that has now hosted 3 World Cup opening matches, the only venue in the history of the competition to achieve that distinction, Shakira and Burna Boy performed the official tournament song together. Shakira, whose connection to football is embedded in the culture of the game after 2010's Waka Waka, returned not as a guest, but as a centerpiece. Alongside her, Mana, the rock band that has sold out venues across the United States and Latin America for 3 decades, who described this as the event of the century for Mexicans. Los Angeles Azules, whose cumbia tradition runs straight back to the roots of Mexican popular music. Lila Downs and her synthesis of indigenous and contemporary Mexican sound. Danny Ocean, Belinda, and Alejandro Fernandez, representing the full breadth of what Mexican music offers the world, and J Balvin, whose reggaeton reach extends to every continent where Latin culture has made its mark. Now compare those two lineups, not in terms of the global audience either will reach, but in terms of what each ceremony says about the host nation. The American ceremony assembled a genuinely multicultural roster of international artists, but the Mexican ceremony assembled something with deeper roots, artists who are not simply globally famous, but specifically and meaningfully connected to the country hosting the match. Mana didn't travel to Mexico City for the World Cup. They are from Mexico City. Los Angeles Azules were not brought in for cultural diversity. They are the cultural tradition. The difference between an international lineup assembled to represent diversity and a national lineup that actually embodies it is subtle but real, and it is visible in the ceremony. Then there is Toronto. Michael Bublé, born in Burnaby, British Columbia, one of the most recognizable Canadian artists in the world, headlined the opening ceremony ahead of Canada's first men's World Cup match ever played on Canadian soil.
Alanis Morissette joined him, two of the most globally recognized names in Canadian popular music, performing in their own country before the first men's World Cup match ever played on Canadian soil. The choice was right because it was honest. Canada put its own cultural identity at the center of its ceremony, with artists who were genuinely from there, and the moment landed exactly as it was supposed to. Beyond the ceremonies, the fan experience in each host nation has told its own story. In Mexico, football is not something that needs to be introduced to a population. Over 70% of the country identifies as a football fan. That is not a figure that requires marketing to activate. When the fan festival in the Zócalo, the historic central square of Mexico City, opens its doors free of charge for the full 39 days of the tournament, with giant screens and live music and a stage and an immersive exhibition tracing the Mesoamerican ballgame back thousands of years, it fills because the people are already there, already invested, already living the tournament as part of their daily life. In Guadalajara, the fan festival at the city's most celebrated public space runs free throughout the tournament. In Monterrey, against the backdrop of the Sierra Madre Mountains visible from the stadium, the same principle applies. Not ticketed events, not designated zones requiring a booking confirmation and a wristband. The tournament in the streets, the tournament in the neighborhoods. The tournament is something the city has absorbed and made its own, rather than something that has been constructed around the city and requires access to participate in. Canada has built its model on a different principle that is no less genuine. The Canada Celebrates program places official fan activities in communities across the entire country, ensuring that every Canadian supporter lives within 2 hours of a viewing site. Large screens, live entertainment, food, music, the tournament distributed across a nation rather than concentrated in 2 host cities. It's an acknowledgement that Canada's football community is genuinely national, genuinely diverse, and genuinely invested in this moment in a way that doesn't require everyone to travel to Toronto or Vancouver to feel it. The compact, electric atmosphere at BMO Field in Toronto and BC Place in Vancouver, both venues with maximum capacities of around 55,000, means the density of the crowd at Canada's matches will produce something that larger stadiums often struggle to match: intensity built from proximity.
Now consider what has been happening in the United States in the same period. The fan festival that was supposed to run for the full tournament at Liberty State Park in New Jersey, the state hosting the final, was canceled. $5 million of dispersed smaller programming replaced it. Seattle's planned fan campus of 74 acres was reduced to a minimum of 4 smaller locations. Hotel occupancy across 11 American host cities has been tracking below initial forecasts, with some operators in Boston, Philadelphia, and Seattle privately describing the tournament as a non-event. Aviation data showed advance bookings from Europe falling year on year. And then there were the numbers in Dallas. A council meeting revealed that around 350,000 tickets for matches at the stadium in Arlington were still unsold at that point, the largest single-city figure in the tournament's inventory story. A venue of extraordinary scale, hosting 9 matches, including a quarter-final, with a visible gap between what was projected and what materialized. That figure doesn't mean the stadium will be empty on match days. Last-minute purchasing, corporate allocations, and the tournament's own momentum will close some of that gap. But it reflects something real about the difference between the enthusiasm that was projected and the enthusiasm that has been demonstrated. The reasons for that gap are documented and specific. Travel barriers affecting supporters from 39 countries, a visa freeze that at its peak affected nationals from 75 nations, LGBTQ supporter organizations in England and Germany announcing they would not bring a visible presence, a father in Alabama who looked at the cost of taking 4 children to see the host nation play and concluded the price was beyond reach. These are not abstract concerns. They are the specific, documented reasons why the international footfall that was supposed to define this tournament has not arrived in the numbers the initial projections required. What makes Canada and Mexico's gain of ground significant is that they have not simply benefited from the United States' difficulties, they have actively done things right. The Canadian government's official communications to international supporters were simple, warm, and practically clear.
"Come, here is what you need, here is what to expect, you are welcome." No ambiguity, no anxiety, no calculation required about whether the journey is worth the risk. Mexico extended the same clarity and went further, stepping into a diplomatic space that the primary host had vacated, accommodating Iran's base camp in Tijuana without conditions and without complaint, absorbing the complexity of a situation not of its making with a quiet confidence that said more about Mexico's understanding of its hosting obligations than any press release. Here is the bigger issue. When the bid was won in 2018, the original proposed blueprint allocated 60 games to the United States, 10 to Canada, and 10 to Mexico. The final allocation gave the United States 78 matches, Mexico 13, and Canada 13. The primary host received a significantly larger share of the football than the original proposal suggested. And with that larger share came a larger responsibility to deliver the experience, the atmosphere, the welcome that those matches require. The evidence accumulated over the past several months suggests that responsibility has been met unevenly. The infrastructure has been delivered, the welcome has been more complicated. Canada and Mexico, working with 13 matches each, have used those matches and the space around them to present something that feels more coherent, more culturally rooted, and more unconditionally inviting than much of what has emerged from the primary host's more complex situation. That is not a reversal of the original hierarchy. The United States will still host the final. Coldplay will still perform the halftime show at MetLife in New Jersey on the 19th of July in what will be one of the most watched musical performances in history. Shakira, Madonna, and BTS will share the final's halftime stage. The American portion of the tournament will still produce the greatest matches, the knockout drama, the trophy lift that the whole world watches.
But the tournament's identity, the story it tells about itself, the character of the experience it has delivered to supporters around the world, that identity has been shaped in these opening days as much by what has happened in Mexico City and Toronto as by what has happened in Los Angeles and Dallas. And in the contest for the tournament's emotional center of gravity, Canada and Mexico have not finished second. Think about what this means for the football itself. Mexico, in Group A with South Africa, South Korea, and Czechia, carry the weight of a nation's expectations and the particular pressure of the curse, 7 consecutive World Cups in which they reached the round of 16 and went no further. Playing at the Azteca in Mexico City, where they drew the opening match against South Africa in a direct repeat of the 2010 opener, with the altitude advantage that 2,000 meters above sea level provides, and with 83,000 of the most passionate supporters in the world behind them, Mexico's chances of breaking that pattern have never been better. Javier Aguirre's side knows this moment. This country was born for exactly it. Canada, in Group B against Switzerland, Qatar, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, faced their most significant home football moment in decades, a generation of players that includes Jonathan David, Sile Larin, Ismail Kone, and an Alphonso Davies who has fought his way back from injury to be available for the tournament he has spent years preparing for. The crowd at BMO Field for their opening match will be unlike anything Canadian football has previously experienced. That crowd will be made of people who have been building toward this moment for years, not casual observers drawn in by a tournament's presence in their city. Genuine football supporters who have watched this generation grow up and who understand exactly what they are witnessing. And the United States, in Group D against Paraguay, Australia, and Romania, opened at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, with Mauricio Pochettino's squad carrying the full weight of home expectations. Christian Pulisic, Tyler Adams, Gio Reyna, a generation of American players who have spent their professional careers developing in European football specifically for the opportunity this tournament represents. They will have the crowd behind them. They will have the infrastructure of a great stadium around them. What they need, more than anything the organization can provide, is the football itself to deliver the story this host nation has been waiting to tell. What do you think?
You followed enough World Cups to have a view on whether the character of a host nation shows in its preparation or only reveals itself once the tournament is underway. Does what Canada and Mexico have delivered in the build-up suggest that the emotional heart of this World Cup will be found in their cities? Or do you believe that once the knockout rounds arrive, once the United States and its extraordinary stadiums become the stage for the tournament's most significant matches, the narrative will shift back to where the original architecture placed it? If you found this worth your time, a like helps more than you'd think. Subscribe if you enjoy thoughtful football coverage, and let me know your view in the comments. I read every one. This story is still developing, and as always, football never stays quiet for long. See you in the next one.